A unanimous victory for pro-lifers. I'm Jason Calvi at the Supreme Court. I'll have that story coming up next.
The violence continues in Iraq, but what's at the root of the conflict? A loss for Teen USA. Can we still advance? Plus, a bombshell report from the Vatican on the family. How well are Catholics practicing their faith? Those stories and more ahead on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, June 26th, 2014. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. From Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Patrick. As we look at your news now, a major decision today from the Supreme Court for the pro-life movement. This deals with states regulating buffer zones around abortion clinics. The decision overturned a 2007 Massachusetts law that kept anyone other than employees and other workers from standing less than 35 feet away from the clinic. Today, the High Court ruled that law violates the First Amendment. EWTN News Nightly's Jason Calvi begins our coverage from the Supreme Court tonight. Jason, tell us more about today's decision.
Well, Brian, with today's decision, unanimous decision, it means pro-lifers in Massachusetts can get right up to the entrance of abortion clinics in that state. In his ruling, the Chief Justice said these weren't protesters, but people looking for personal, caring, consensual conversation. These do not stand lines have kept 76-year-old Eleanor McCullen 35 feet from Massachusetts abortion clinics.
I want to be able to hand out my brochure to anyone that would be interested in receiving it any place.
And now she'll be able to do that. All the members of the High Court said the Massachusetts law violates the First Amendment's free speech protections.
Today's decision was unanimous.
The decision today impacts probably 4 laws across the country that keep pro-lifers away from mothers entering abortion clinics at that very last moment, the last chance that we have to save these babies.
And we know that
we have groups on over 838 campuses across the nation, and majority of those groups go out in front of the abortion facilities to pray and to sidewalk advocate.
Including California student Katie Young.
This girl comes out and she says, I'm 15 weeks pregnant and I saw your sign, I couldn't go through with it.
But today's decision was a defeat for buffer zone supporters. They say the zones prevent violence and congestion in front of abortion clinics. What about those women being right there at the doorway to present them with the alternative of adoption, for example?
I think they should do that, but beyond a 35-foot buffer zone.
And fiery debate erupted outside the court today.
silent judges go away.
It was unanimous!
Okay. When you get a uterus, then you can talk to us, okay?
So why are you protesting out here on behalf if you don't have
because
a uterus?
I care about them.
And I
That's
care
why.
about women not
it doesn't
being
matter.
traumatized by abortion.
Mark Repke was born to a 14-year-old mother a few years before the Roe v. Wade decision.
Would I be here if abortion would have been legal 3 years earlier? No, I wouldn't. So love me or hate me, I have a right to exist.
And if he wants now, the chance to share his story close to a Massachusetts abortion clinic. The Massachusetts Attorney General, who defended the law, says now their work begins again. She says they're going to be looking at current laws as well as possibly new laws to protect access to their clinics in the state. Also heard from several of the people who won the case today, including Eleanor McCullen and Father Eric Hayden. Both of them tell me they're very excited with today's unanimous decision. Brian?
All right, thank you. Jason Calvi from the U.S. Supreme Court tonight. Hans van Spakovsky with the Heritage Foundation and Hannah Smith from the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty are here to offer more insight. Hannah, this was a unanimous decision, but there wasn't complete agreement.
That's right. And I first want to say we're very proud of our colleague Mark Rienzi, who picked up this case 4 years ago and argued it all the way up to the Supreme Court. This is not a Becket Fund case, but we're very proud of him for the unanimous result that he achieved today at the Supreme Court. There was unanimity, and it's wonderful to see all 9 justices agree that this violates the First Amendment. There was a majority opinion authored by the Chief Justice, joined by the liberal-leaning justices on the court. And then there were 2 other opinions, concurrences, that were written by Justice Scalia and Justice Alito. So they agreed that the statute violated the First Amendment, but they disagreed on the reasons, and that's why they wrote separately.
Hans, a victory for pro-life, a complete victory, or so-so?
No, it is a victory. It could have gone further, and in fact, you know, the majority gave the benefit of the doubt to the state of Massachusetts and said, well, they didn't think this law, the buffer zone, had been passed with the intent of discriminating against pro-life activists. Scalia and Alito both said, oh please.
It's pretty obvious.
It's pretty obvious that's exactly what it was intended to do.
So what about buffer zone laws in other states?
Well, I think you see the majority opinion here saying that this particular statute burdens more speech than is necessary. And if you look at other states around the country, they've been able to curtail their concerns about public safety and access in other ways that were less restrictive of speech. And so that was really what they were saying today, is this is just too restrictive. It burdens too much speech. And so there are other examples around the country where you might be able to achieve the same result in Massachusetts, but doing it in a way that burdens less speech.
Do either of you think that this decision today will give us any indication on how the court will go in the Hobby Lobby Conestoga Wood HHS mandate challenge?
Well, you know, we were talking about this before we actually got here, and I think we had a little bit of disagreement on that. I don't really think it gives us an indication. I believe, frankly, there may be a bigger split amongst the justices. I went to the oral arguments, I heard them. I suspect some of the liberal justices will, unfortunately, be just fine with what the government was doing.
Hannah, what do you think?
Well, Hobby Lobby is a Becket Fund case, and I was in the courtroom when Paul Clement argued the case in March. And, you know, we're very optimistic about the outcome in that case. And I do actually think that some of the indications today where the court talked about there are less restrictive means that the government could have employed to achieve its result here, I think some of that language actually could be quite helpful in bringing some of the more liberal-leaning justices over to our side in the Hobby Lobby decision. But we will definitely know on Monday.
Interesting times with the Supreme Court. Hannah and Hans, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So that is the top case on our watch list. It still hasn't been decided, but Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Wood claiming that the HHS contraception mandate puts an undue burden on the religious beliefs of the company owners. Now, we expect that decision on Monday, as Hannah just said, but ahead of that, people rallied at the Supreme Court today in support of the two Christian-owned companies. We caught up with the executive director of the Becket Fund, which represents Hobby Lobby.
The Supreme Court to rule on this super important case for the rights of individuals to live according to their deeply held convictions.
And of course, the Becket Fund also represents our network, EWTN, in a related legal challenge to the mandate. There is a new report out tonight about how most Catholics practice their faith versus what the Church teaches. A Vatican document released today says most Catholics reject the Church's teaching on sex and contraception. The information is coming from a questionnaire sent to bishops' conferences around the world last fall. Our Alan Holdren is getting reaction. He'll join us from Rome in just a few minutes. Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. British Foreign Secretary William Hague is in Baghdad. He's trying to unite politicians in Iraq, rallying them in opposition to Sunni insurgents. Like the United States, the UK has no plan to send combat troops to Iraq, but Hague says his country will provide diplomatic, counterterrorism, and humanitarian support. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Defense says some American military personnel are already in Baghdad. It's confirmed tonight that teams of special forces and advisors are now helping the Iraqis beef up the defense of their capital. Our Wyatt Goolsby is here now with the latest. Wyatt?
Yes, Brian. Defense officials say another 4 teams of special forces will arrive in Baghdad in the next few days. They'll be working to set up a joint operations center, specifically to help in intelligence and training. The Iraqi military will need the help as they continue to try to defend key areas against insurgents.
Iraqi soldiers are working desperately to hold off the militant group ISIS. This video released today by Iraq's military shows troops in and around the country's largest oil refinery just north of Baghdad. Clashes have been ongoing for control of the area, the money, and the wider region. Amid the violence are Christians who just want peace. Earlier today, around 2,000 Christians entered the Kurdish city of Erbil. These families fled from their villages outside of Mosul.
Yes, we are afraid for Christians. Different groups of Christians are treated badly. They're being displaced.
We won't have a future here in Iraq. Never. Now I want to immigrate to a European country. Now, at this moment.
ISIS continues to attack traditionally Christian villages in the north of Iraq, leaving some of these families with little hope of ever going home.
There are a lot of people who wish to immigrate in this situation because our future is unknown. And in general, the future of Iraq is unknown. But we, as a Christian minority, our future is even more unknown. Honestly, we can't predict our future.
And there are very few safe places right now where Christians or other minorities can go. The Kurdistan region in the north right now seems to be the one place where Christians can find shelter. But as we're seeing, Brian, a lot of that is just temporary.
And Wyatt, isn't it getting more difficult for anyone really to travel in that part of the world right now?
Yeah, certainly there are more checkpoints at nearly every major city. But the other big thing right now is that there's a fuel shortage in Iraq, which, yes, is making it more difficult no matter where you need to go.
Thank you, Wyatt. We've spent a good deal of time talking about this conflict in Iraq, but let's take a look now at how the country became such a divided place. Sunni and Shia, they're terms most of us hadn't even heard of until the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The division goes all the way back to the 7th century. That's when Muhammad died, and there was a dispute over who would replace him as the leader of Islam. Sunnis are the largest branch of Islam, but in Iraq and Iran, Shiites are the majority. It wasn't a big issue until post-World War I. The French and British divided up the Ottoman Empire without considering the religious and ethnic differences in the region. Fast forward to Saddam Hussein's reign. Even though most Muslims in Iraq are Shiites, he killed many of them and favored his fellow Sunnis. The post-Hussein government was supposed to include both factions, but is dominated by the Shiite majority, disenfranchising the once powerful Sunnis. Now, some Iraqi Sunnis are fighting back, joining forces with those who want to create an Islamic State, the group known as ISIS. And then on to Jordan, where a preacher with ties to al-Qaeda has been acquitted in a foiled plan to attack an American school in Amman. A 3-judge panel ruled that there wasn't enough evidence to convict Abu Qatada in the 1999 plot. There is, however, a second set of charges involving terror plots in 2000. A court will rule in that case in September. It's been a back-and-forth journey for a Christian woman in Sudan. First, Miriam Ibrahim was arrested and condemned to death for not converting to Islam. International pressure led to her release, but she's been detained twice since that release. Questions have been raised about the legality of her travel documents, her passports. We do know she is free tonight, but perhaps not free to leave Sudan. U.S. soccer fans may be disappointed with today's loss to Germany, but still have reason to celebrate tonight. Team USA is one of 16 teams to move on in the World Cup tournament in Brazil. Our Laura Cole crashed one of today's World Cup viewing parties.
It's the chant heard around the country today. People showing their support for the U.S. soccer team in what they wear and what they wave.
Flags here. Came out to support America.
This is the largest viewing party here in D.C. There are thousands of people here. Many of them asked us not to show them on camera because they called in sick to work just to be here.
This morning, World Cup brackets were missing just a few flags in the final day of the group phase. It was a big day for the U.S.'s Group G, known as the Group of Death, with simultaneous matches between Germany and the U.S., Portugal, and Ghana. A win from lowest-ranked Portugal has secured both the U.S. and Germany's spots in the next round. At the final whistle, Germany beat the U.S. 1-0.
It's great to see everybody out. It's actually really fun to have the German fans out, too. Get a little bit of banter back and forth.
Special. I did not expect so many soccer fans here in America. I thought you were just about football and baseball. And it's nice, it feels like home a bit.
Today, even the president tuned in from Air Force One while he flew to Minneapolis for a town hall meeting. So from the president to the spirited drummer, it's all about that goal. Soccer bringing the red, white, and blue together in more ways than one.
It's really nice to see the unity.
Laura Cole, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Laura. And FIFA has banned Uruguayan striker Luis Suarez from all soccer activities for 4 months because he bit an opponent in a World Cup game. He's out of the rest of the tournament and the start of the upcoming Premier League season. The ban is effective immediately and also covers Uruguay's next 9 international games. Suarez is also fined $112,000 for biting that player during Uruguay's 1-0 win over Italy. The ban means Suarez will miss Uruguay's round of 16 game against Colombia this Saturday. Now to the hard court. It's an exciting night for some of the nation's best young basketball players. They're hoping to be drafted by the NBA. 2 of the top prospects for the first overall draft pick, KU's Andrew Wiggins and Duke's Jabari Parker. The Cleveland Cavaliers could choose one of those 2 or trade their #1 pick for a current NBA player. Coming up, another important case today from the Supreme Court. When can the president appoint people to positions without the approval of Congress? And church leaders discuss the relationship between the church, the family, and the culture. Details from Rome just ahead. Thanks for watching EWTN News Nightly on this Thursday, June 26th. The Vatican today released the results of that famous questionnaire on the reality of the family and how the church deals with families around the world. Those results have been put into a 75-page booklet, which will be the guide for 2 weeks of meetings in October. Our Rome correspondent Alan Holdren was there for the presentation. Alan, what is the meat of this document?
Well, Brian, really they presented the state of the family in the world today. They talked about the strengths of the church's care for families and also the weaknesses and ideas for their improvement. This is all contained within this document that will be a guide to discussions that will take place here in the Vatican this coming October.
So, Alan, we know they'll look at issues like the growing number of couples that are cohabitating, same-sex unions, the divorced and remarried. How do they plan to approach these issues?
Well, they said they're not going to be closing their eyes to any of the disturbing or uncomfortable realities of personal or family life in the world. And what they're going to be talking about in these 2 weeks of meetings is going to be guided by this document, guided by all of the input that they've gotten from the rest of the world. And the people who will be benefiting from this, it will be the entire church after their discussions, but in those meetings it will be the 200 experts and church leaders that will be talking about it. Vatican officials at this point aren't concerned about whether or not this will be fruitful. What they're concerned about is whether or not the message, the true message of what they're talking about, will actually reach people out in the world. Brian?
All right, Alan Holdren from Rome, we appreciate you. The Pope has lots of titles. One used to be Patriarch of the West, but the Holy Father cares about the Eastern Catholic churches as well. Pope Francis met today with a relief organization for the Eastern churches. The Pope expressed solidarity with Eastern Catholics in Syria and Iraq. He also expressed concern for people in other areas of conflict. Joining us tonight is Metropolitan Kallistos Ware, an English bishop in the Eastern Orthodox Church, senior member of the Catholic Orthodox International Dialogue. Your Eminence, thank you for being with us. What brings you to Washington?
I've come here to Washington to take part in the Orientale Lumen Conference. This is a movement that's been going on for 17 years, having conferences usually here in Washington to promote closer contacts between the Orthodox and the Catholic churches.
And that's what I want to talk to you about. Pope Francis, what is he doing for ecumenism in this area of getting Peter and Andrew back together?
Now, I've never met Pope Francis. I met his two predecessors on several occasions. First of all, it's clear that the meeting he's had in Jerusalem with the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople has gone well. And meetings of this kind are perhaps symbolic in importance, but symbols matter.
I thought it was very important, too, that when he invited the presidents of Israel and Palestine to come to the Vatican Gardens to pray for peace, Bartholomew was there with him.
Yes, I was very pleased that the patriarch was invited. And yes, they planted a tree in the Vatican, and I hope the tree will bear good fruit.
What do you see as the opportunity for unity? Are we closer than ever? It certainly seems like it.
First of all, we meet one another. We know each other as persons. That was not true 50, 100 years ago. We just formed our views from a distance. And there is nothing better than to meet face to face. One of the important steps towards Christian unity is precisely to foster ecumenical friendships.
What do you think Roman Catholics can gain from getting to know the Eastern Orthodox Church better?
At the moment, in our International Commission for Dialogue, we are talking precisely about the doctrine of the Church, about the relationship between primacy on the one hand and synodality or collegiality on the other. That is about the relation between the Pope as first and the whole College of Bishops. And I think we Orthodox ought to give more importance to the element of primacy. And perhaps on the Catholic side, the Catholics can learn a little about the advantages and dangers of collegiality.
We all have a lot to learn. Metropolitan Kallistos Ware, thank you so much. We appreciate you visiting us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So back to the Supreme Court for a moment. The High Court ruled today on presidential appointments without Senate approval. The court said President Obama went too far with his appointments to the National Labor Relations Board in 2012, so those appointments are now invalid. He can only make appointments without approval during a recess, but only Congress can declare when it's in recess. So even if all the senators are gone but not officially in recess, the court says the president can't make appointments without their approval. Missouri's Attorney General is trying to stop St. Louis officials from violating that state's constitution. The Constitution says marriage is a union between one man and one woman, but a municipal judge in St. Louis ignored that and allowed 4 same-sex couples to exchange vows during a ceremony at the mayor's office. Voters passed the constitutional amendment defining marriage in 2004. Up next, go ahead, take that big gulp. A judge rules New York City can't ban jumbo-sized drinks. And are hundreds of small earthquakes in Texas an act of God or the result of fracking? It is good to have you with us for EWTN News Nightly. Good evening, I'm Brian Patrick, and supersized sodas are safe in New York City. The Big Apple's highest court has decided not to reinstate the city's ban on those sugary drinks larger than 16 ounces. New York's health department banned big bottles of pop in 2012 as a way to try to fight obesity. A lower court overturned the law, siding with restaurants and beverage companies. They say the city doesn't have the authority to impose that ban. Today's ruling reinforced the decision, so movie theaters, stadiums, and anywhere else they can now offer free or are free to supersize. It won't be free, I'm sure. Earthquakes are often called an act of God, but the people in a Texas town are blaming someone else. Homeowners in this Texas town believe the natural gas drillers have become bad neighbors.
You have 13 disposal wells, injection wells.
Barbara Brown says since the industry expanded its fracking operation near her house 5 years ago, she counts the progress by cracks in her foundation and masonry. She says as the number of injection wells increased, so did the number of earthquakes, once unheard of in this stretch of prairie.
And the only thing that's changed in that area is now they have all these injection sites. Well, gee, I wonder what the problem could be.
Since December, the city of Azle has counted more than 300 earthquakes. All have been 3 or less on the Richter scale.
Yeah, I felt a couple of them. The first one we actually felt was during a city council meeting, so that was kind of strange.
The city, together with the oil and gas companies, have asked seismologists from Southern Methodist University to study the tremors to see if the cause is man-made.
So we have 12 stations out right now recording seismicity.
The researchers say their work will take about a year.
There is an old fault system called the Newark East Fault Zone that does extend through and dies out into the Reno and Azle area. And it's that fault system that we believe has been reactivated.
Representatives from ExxonMobil, the parent company of the driller in charge of the wastewater injection wells, said in a written statement, quote, "The study will help inform and educate all parties on exactly where these events are taking place and possible causes," end quote. But Barbara Brown worries waiting for the study will help the industry obscure the truth.
They're raping our land, they're destroying our homes, they're ruining our health.
She says the drive to get gas from the ground is hurting the city and the people. That's why she's pushing for a moratorium on dumping fracking wastewater underground. There's still a lot of questions out there about fracking. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about it in the months ahead. I want to watch for 2 special guests on the world over with Raymond Arroyo tonight here on EWTN. Ray talks with Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal about his life, his conversion, and the important issues in his state. Also, Colin Ray, country music legend, will be joining Ray. The world over, you can go to EWTN.com for encore times in your area. We will see you here tomorrow. We thank you for joining us tonight. You can follow us on Facebook, and that's like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you for watching tonight. Good night, and may God bless you.